Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be talking about the 824B support tier list. I'll have a link in the description to this Google Doc. I'll also have timestamps, so if you don't have time to watch the whole thing, you can always scroll down, find your favorite parts. Be sure to check out my patch notes video as well. That's going to be linked in the Google Doc in the description. And I'll also add some timestamps into the comments as well if you don't want to have to click through the description. Now, this is the patch update that showed up, I believe, on December the 17th. So this is not the earlier patch, like near the very beginning of December. This is halfway through, right before the holiday season. And as always, in the Google Doc, you can find links to recommended stuff for each one of the champions. So if you click on the link, it'll tell you recommended runes, recommended items. Then I have a quick rating system as well for those of you new to the channel. It's a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the champion is one of the worst at the role at that position, 5 being the champion is one of the best at the role at that position. So lane pressure is how likely is the champion able to get priority in the lane, how likely are they able to poke out the enemy champion, just do some very effective harassment. Kill threat is how likely is the champion able to get a kill in the lane. Safety is how well can the champion evade ganks, how well can they position later on in the game. Scaling is how well does the champion perform over time. And then reliability is how likely is it that someone can play consistently on the champion, right? So how often can they put up consistent results? So part of this comes down to what's the mechanical challenge of the champion? Is it hard to land the skill shots, easy to land the skill shots? But it also comes down to how does the champion fit into the meta? Are there a bunch of counter picks out there that could be very effective at the champion? That could cause some wildly fluctuating results, right? So reliability, we're just looking at how likely is it that someone can perform at a high level over numerous games on the champion. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here. Just a really quick recap of the patch notes here as far as it pertains to support. Pyke is obviously going to be knocked down just a little bit. He got some direct nerfs. I don't think it'll affect his support role as much as it's, mostly pertains to his wave clear and post level 11 execute damage on his R, but it will knock him down a little bit. AD carry meta I don't think is going to change that much. They gave some buffs to Caitlyn and Corki. It's not going to matter. They're still not going to be that great. The Triss buffs are interesting. I don't think it's going to move her up too much, maybe a little bit. Varus buffs are interesting, but once again, probably not going to dethrone champions like Lucian, Draven, Jhin, and Twitch right now. We'll see. We'll check back in after they change the crit itemization near the start of next year. Okay, so this is a big one, though. As far as supports go, they are buffing Forbidden Idol. They're bringing it back up to 10% CDR, which is a huge deal. That makes it way, way more efficient, particularly on champions that are going to get 2 Forbidden Idol items. So if they're going to get Ardent Censer and Redemption, this is a very, very big deal. It's also pretty good on champions that get Athenes. Although Athenes itself doesn't use Forbidden Idol, those types of champions will usually get Ardent Censer. So like your Sonas, your Namis, they're still going to benefit from this, but the biggest beneficiaries are going to be people who go the double Forbidden Idol items, and sometimes even triple if they get Mikhail's, and that's going to be your Jannas and your Sorakas, pretty much. So they got a huge spike. Speaking of which, Mikhail's got its 5% plus healing and shielding back, so that's a really huge deal. That's fantastic for Soraka. That's really good for Janna, because both of them don't really use Athene's and Holy Grail that well. So having Mikhail's as a viable option is very good on them. Pretty much everybody likes Ardent Censors, so that's a nice buff for them. All of the enchanters do, and pretty much all of the enchanters are going to like Redemption as well. Keep in mind that someone like Soraka or Janna is probably going to get Redemption as a second item after Ardent, possibly even a first item, and so it's going to be more useful on them than like Nami and Sona, who are going to get it as a third item, most likely. So once again, it buffs all the enchanters, but particularly Soraka and Janna are going to be the biggest beneficiaries there. Okay, Alistar nerf. I mean, that's going to hurt one of the primary engaged champs, so Alistar is going to take a pretty big hit off of this. Alistar is not that great below Diamond anyways, and this tier list is mostly targeted towards people that are, Platinum, Gold, Silver, and then also a little bit into Bronze and Iron, although the meta starts to change a little bit in there. And it can still apply to Diamond, Master, Challenger, but the meta starts getting a little bit different there as you start moving towards the extremes of the rating system. But Alistar is going to fall down a little bit. I don't think it'll impact the overall meta too much. He's already not that great, like I said, under Diamond. Now, Zeke's is a big deal as well. They're knocking a lot of damage off of Zeke's, so They're taking it from 50% damage down to 30%. Now remember, this is over 2 seconds, so the on-hit damage is half of that. So they're basically taking it from 25% on-hit damage down to 15% on-hit damage. And I've heard some other commentators like, Scar saying, well, this is not a big deal because Zeke's is already so strong. It's like true, but you got to keep in mind that tank itemization does not often have the same kind of synergy as enchanter itemization does. And what that means is it's like, yeah, Zeke's by itself will still be okay, but now Ardent Censer is going to be, up there with Zeke's anyways for enchanters. But then they can get things like Redemption and Mikhail's or Athene's on top of Ardent Censer, and all those stats start working together to scale tremendously heavily, right? Versus a lot of the tank stuff has a bunch of anti-synergy to it, right? So like Zeke's doesn't really synergize well with any other tank item. Like usually you just go over and get Knight's Vow after that, but like those items have no synergy with each other. You can get Locket, but Locket's pretty bad unless you get Knight's Vow. If you get Knight's Vow and then go into Locket and just skip the Zeke's, then there is some synergy there because, the blocking damage fits pretty well with Locket, and the health off of Knight's Vow also goes with Locket. But those, especially at Platinum Minus, tanks are already priced into getting the 3-ward item because that's going to have your CDR on it, whereas enchanters, can just go Nomads or Frostfang and just stop at that and not get the 3-ward or not get the 4-ward item until much later in the game. So they're already going to have a lot more gold as well to start scaling even harder. So what this means is the single item power spike of coming to lane with your Zeke's when you're Alistar or Leona or whatever and trying to really push your early power advantage over the enchanters is going to be much, much weaker. And so it's going to be a lot more likely that, you're not going to be able to kill that Janna in an all-in, or you're not going to be able to kill that Sona as easily in an all-in, and they're just going to outscale you at 2 items later. So I think this was a really bad call. I think that I don't mind the enchanter buffs. Obviously, I like enchanters, and a lot of people on the channel are going to like enchanters, because it's a support-based channel. But I think they're really overestimating just how powerful tanks are at Platinum and lower. I mean, they have atrocious win rates for the most part, right? So, like, even Leona, like, one of the best, like, anti-enchanter champs is only at a 50% win rate. I think Alistar was down at, like 48%. And then you start getting down into Tom Kench, it's like 43% on Tom Kench. Braum, under 48%. Nautilus, 48%. So, the tanks are in a really, really bad spot. Even Tarek's kind of like a hybrid with enchanters, so he's a little bit higher at 50%. Yeah, tanks are just atrocious right now. Like, there's no, like, why? Nerf Zeke's. I mean, it's for pro play, where people will typically just get their 4-ward item, Zeke's, and then just, stack a bunch of control wards, and that's it for the whole game. So I guess that's a move for pro play, but anyone that likes to play tanks at Platinum and lower is just in really bad shape right now. Thresh is going to be one of the hardest champions hit because he doesn't have other items he can really get. I mean, you can start going, Redemption on Thresh, but you can't really do the old school Redemption plus Locket builds as comfortably anymore because they nerfed both of those items. So that Redemption doesn't work very well unless you have a lot of other plus healing and shielding to go with it. And simultaneously, Locket doesn't work well unless you have a bunch of HP to go with it. So he's going to be even more out of luck than usual with his items. Like, yeah, he can go Knight's Vow early, but he only gets half the benefit because he counts as a ranged champion. So I think that's going to be really rough on Thresh. It's going to be moderately tough on Rakan, just because Rakan really had a lot of synergy with Zeke's. But, I think he'll be okay. I think Rakan can still go Ardent Censer early. And if he goes for like a Q build with Airy or something like that, then he'll have some pretty good harassment early, and that extra mana regen will let him spam his Q more. So, Ardent first on Rakan's okay, and then he can get Shurelya's as well if he needs to. So, he has options. He can go Ardent, Shurelya's, Redemption. All of these are on the table. He's going to be a lot squishier if he does that, but he does have other options. But yeah, a lot of these other tanks do not have those other options. So, that's going to be really rough on the tanks. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here. Now, I think Nami's still going to be number 1. I talked about Nami a lot last time, and I've been playing her a ton on the channel lately. She just has a really awesome, well-rounded kit. She has some of the best trading early on in the game. She's extremely safe. So the trading, you do damage and heal all in one spell at a pretty reasonable mana cost. Her itemization is great. You know, she can go Ardent into Athene's, or she can go Ardent into Redemption. Pretty flexible build path there, especially now that Mikhail's is on board. You could even get a Mikhail's fairly early if they have a lot of CC. They have like an Ashe or a Varus, Thresh, something like that. That'll still be pretty good on her. Her bubble is fantastic CC. It's a great 1-point wonder. It CCs for 1.5 seconds. It can hit multiple targets. Very, very strong. It goes over minions, so you don't have to worry about getting blocked by minions in the laning phase if you're trying to land this on somebody. So that's super helpful. Tidecaller's Blessing just allows you to control the fight. You know, speeds people up. It'll slow enemies down when they get hit. And then Tidal Wave is a pretty good disengage mechanic or follow-up engage. So really good at knocking away anyone that's trying to dive your team. It does have a significant cast time on it. You know, it takes about a half a second to cast, and it does move pretty slowly. But it's still pretty solid if you time it right at disengaging things like Rakan or disengaging Alistar or just a bunch of other champions that might try to dive your team. So unless they one-shot the person on your team, you're probably going to be able to peel them off with just a Tidal Wave plus a bubble on them, and then you just, you know, speed up your ally with Tidecaller's Blessing. So fantastic champ, scales really well with AP because it scales your heal, it scales your damage, and it makes your bounces do more. So awesome with double AP like Ardent Censer plus Athene's Unholy Grail. Pretty good with plus healing and shielding as well. Very safe. That's the thing too, is like her range is 725 and it can bounce and hit multiple people at even further ranges. Tidecaller's Blessing is 800. This is like 2700 away. You know, this is 875, so she can stay very, very far back and not get hit by a lot of other collateral AoE damage or CC that's going out in fights. So that's a major advantage of her over a lot of other enchanters like Sona and Soraka who have to get very close in order to be effective with their healing and shielding. So it's a huge edge to her, and that's what makes her one of the safer picks, who's very aggressive early and has some moderate scaling later. It's not going to scale as well as something like a Sona or a Soraka as far as just like raw healing output, but she has really good utility, and that presence early I think makes up for it. Okay, Sona's another one. Sona is really, really good. I think definitely if you are silver and lower, I would absolutely favor Sona as the best support right now. She's just super consistent. I think she's still really solid in gold. She starts to taper off a little bit later just because it's more dangerous with her, but you know, I've seen challengers and diamond people use her very effective. And the thing about her is she just scales so well with this W. I'm not going to go into all this math right now, but just a quick glance can tell you just how powerful this is. It's already going to have a 0.5 that's going to heal 2 people, and then the shield is an additional 30 per person. So even if you're only healing and shielding 2 people, it's a 1.1 AP ratio. And if you start shielding, you know, 3 or 4 people, you can very easily get up to 1.5 to 2.0 AP ratio. So scales extremely well with Ardent Censer and with Athene's, because you're going to be putting out pretty good AoE damage with your auto attacks, your hymns, and your Q, or your whatever, your power chords and your Q in fights. So you're going to be powering up, dealing out some pretty good AoE damage, and powering up that Athene's. And this goes to be a really low cooldown too. When you max this out, it's 6 seconds. You'll get an additional 25% CDR at level 11, and then you're naturally going to have, you know, 20 to 30% CDR in the game as well. So this goes down to about 3 seconds, which just puts out a tremendous shield, tremendous healing. So basically what it comes down to, if it's a team fight and, you know, it lasts more than like 5 to 10 seconds, if Sona gets off 2 of these W's before you can kill somebody, you're going to lose the fight probably. She just puts out way, way too much healing and shielding, way too much utility with her Q, way too much just Ardent Censer power. She gives it to everybody that touches her aura that gets that shield. So she just has extreme synergy with the enchanter items. She does have pretty good harassment early on too. You know, if you take Airy and then you put, you know, 2 or 3 points of your Q in the laning phase, especially when you can come back with an Amp Tome, you can really put out some decent harass, especially against champions that don't fight you back very well early on. So she's not quite as good at trading early on as someone like Nami is, but she can still put out some pretty good numbers. Now, she is going to be more weak to ganks because she has to get in closer to heal. She has a very slow base movement speed. And really low base stats, so she is squishy. She can get blown up, but especially if you have a front line that can protect you, if you have a tank or 2 on your team, she can be fantastic. So I think she's really, really good hyperscaling support. Okay, next up, Zyra. Zyra's just the best AP champ out there. Ton of presence early on. I think there's a really good build with her. You can still go Dark Harvest if you want. I think Electrocute is higher, single target damage, but Dark Harvest has that scaling, and it's pretty good for just poking people out that are pretty low. It's just Electrocute or Dark Harvest, Taste of Blood, Eyeball Collection, Ulti Hunter, and then Presence of Mind and Coup de Grace. You can substitute Ulti Hunter for Ravenous Hunter if you want to. You know, that will give you a little bit more healing in the laning phase. But I think having more ultimates is just so powerful. Like, her ult has extreme value in team fights. Not only does it spread a lot of damage and, you know, enrage your plants to make them do a lot more damage, but it also knocks up the enemy team, causes a lot of disruption. So I think that's a really powerful combination. So, yeah, the thing about Zyra, too, versus Brand, I get asked about this a lot. Why would you play Zyra over Brand? A couple of reasons for that. Number one is she can harass through the lane a lot easier. So you can cast both your Q and your E through a minion wave, so you don't have to have a clear line of sight to all-in somebody with the E like you do with Brand, you know, having to hit people with the Q. You have to have a clear line of sight. Not so with Zyra. Also, those plants are excellent for vision and fighting over control wards early on because control wards do not shut out plant vision. So if you put this in the tri-bush or any brush that you're trying to contest, where you know they have a control ward in there, it'll give you full vision of the area, and it'll act as a bodyguard for you if they try to come up to stop you from clearing out that pink ward. So if you're on red side, if you're on top side, working your way towards bot, and you're trying to clear out that little tri-bush near the blue side, a really simple trick is use one plant just to gain vision of the area. Start clearing it out. They will almost always walk over to try to contest you, and then you can try to all-in them with an E and your other plant, plus your ult, and you can usually get them to flash or die a lot of the time. So she has tremendous all-in. She has very similar all-in damage to Brand. Brand might have a little bit more if you hit them with everything, but her damage is quite a lot, and the fact that she has the extra vision control and extra utility in fights is really strong. She also takes things like Dragon and Baron really quickly. Now, Brand can start doing that once he gets Leandri's with his burn damage. But Zyra's plants, particularly for early Dragons, are very, very strong at taking those types of objectives. You can also use the plants to soak tower shots. So if you're trying to siege down a tower and you have a couple of seeds around, you can spawn the plants with your Q. They will take one tower shot. They don't hit the tower themselves, but it still saves an extra hit on the minions. So that can actually be a really underrated part of her kit that helps her out as far as taking early tower plates. She also has really long attack range, so she has 525 attack range. And she has virtually infinite mana because she starts with 15 mana for her 5 for some reason, which is insane. I think Bran has like 8. And her spells are all pretty cheap, and you're usually waiting on plants anyways for your trading patterns. So you just virtually have infinite mana, which is really nice in the laning phase. So I think Zyra is the best AP champ to go with. Now, you can get outscaled by enchanters if they get to 2 or 3 items because they're going to get those items faster than you because your items are more expensive unless you have a ton of kills. And plus healing and shielding, plus the AP just stacks multiplicatively a lot heavier than just AP. Even AP and Pin is not going to stack as high as plus healing and shielding. Check out my itemization video if you want to know more about that. I'm not going to go into the total math there, but very, very strong because of the way that it works with resistances instead of against resistances, the healing and shielding. So basically, you need to close out the game quickly as Zyra. You do not want that Sona to get to 3 items, or you're going to have a real hard time killing people in team fights. But she is very good at doing that. She's probably the best lane bully and one of the best tower-taking supports because of her extreme range. And she does transition really well into team fights. She does take objectives very well. So, going to be a super strong champion. Much more effective at gold and lower where it's easier to hit those skill shots. It's easier to harass people out. But she can still be pretty effective at plat and even into low diamond. Okay, Janna is kind of the rising star here. I think that Janna is going to be the biggest beneficiary of those changes on the patch notes because she doesn't use Athene's Unholy Grail that well. And so being able to get Mikhail's again is a huge boon to her. She's very good with Ardent Sensor because that extra attack speed scales well with her shielding because it gives extra AD. And so having the extra on-hit damage, giving out the extra attack speed is going to allow people to land more auto attacks while the shield is up on them, which is going to, transition into more damage. So We'll see. This is kind of preliminary. I am a little bit worried about Zyra in the Janna in the laning phase against things like Sona and against things like Nami. But I have seen a build here that I was looking up with Janna. And some people have recommended this in the past, and I don't know if it was really worth it to try to do it in the past, but I think the times are changing a little bit here. So she doesn't have a ton of games like played, but she has a pretty high win rate. And a lot of people are going with Comet, which seems kind of silly at first because Aerie just is so good because she does so much healing and shielding. But ever since they nerfed the healing and shielding, I guess probably like maybe 5 or 6 patches ago, maybe it was longer than that, where they made her, I guess it was back in like 8.12, where they made her shield start decaying after 75 seconds. People have really almost just moved away from her shield in the early game, and they've gone towards more of this kind of early harass champ. Now, with Arcane Comet, your W is going to slow people down, so it's going to be highly likely that your Comet's going to land, so that's really nice. And then the rest of the build, pretty much, a lot of people will just go Mana Flow Band. I'm not entirely sold on Celerity. It's okay. You can definitely do Celerity. I think that there's certainly an argument for Absolute Focus, particularly if you're against a champion you can push around early. It doesn't have a lot of harass, maybe like a Rakan or something like that. Water Walking, people are taking this more and more too, so you can rotate up and down the river a lot better. It'll give you that extra AP for when you're trying to contest dragons or barons, which are even more important now. And they're up more often now, so that's a pretty attractive one. If you're going to be able to bully the lane, you can still take Scorch. And then a lot of people are going towards this Taste of Blood secondary, so it gives you that extra little bit of healing. It's not going to let you totally keep up with things like Nami and Sona, but it will give you a little bit more play there. And then Relentless Hunter will give you more rotations, more abilities. So the nice thing about Janna, she's very good with like a split push kind of comp because she can rotate, get wards up, and just rotate to hotspots pretty quickly. So she's just kind of the queen of speed. It does also speed up the rest of your team. If we look at Janna here, passively gains 8% movement speed and grants the same amount to allied champions that are moving towards her. So the more movement speed you have, the more speed you're going to end up giving your allies for rotations and things like that. Now, he's maxing out. This is kind of like what I like to do as a build. I like to get maybe 3 points of W in lane, just so you have some presence depending on how the lane's going. If you're getting stomped, you can go ahead and transition over to shield. And then start maxing out your shield by level 9 or level 10. And that way you're ready for the mid-game team fights, but you do have some presence in the early game to kind of keep up with other people. So I think if she's not against something like a Sona or a Nami, then she definitely can, if you can dodge things like Zyra's plants and stay away from Brand and things like that, she definitely can put out some pretty solid harassment early on. So it's worth considering. And then, of course, her late game is always awesome. It's fantastic peel. Her ultimate's fantastic. Well, let's use fantastic twice there. But her ultimate is still the same thing. They haven't touched this. It not only displaces and knocks people back, which is a great fight reset, but it just heals for an insane amount over time. So that's really powerful. And then the shield is still pretty legit once you get a lot of points into it. Yeah, it does decay over time, but in the late game when you put this on somebody, they're going to break it pretty quickly anyways. And then, yeah, you do have the W or the Q is also very nice if you're against something like a Lee Sin or a Kha'Zix or a Rengar or something that's just trying to do some type of mobility to jump in on you. Then she can be pretty good with that. Now, one thing to consider also with Janna is she doesn't apply Ardent Sensor very well to multiple targets. So if you have a bunch of people on your team that can benefit from Ardent Sensor, then you're kind of losing out a little bit versus if you played someone like Sona and Nami. Nami can put Ardent Sensor on a ton of different people because you can use your E to target an ally. That will apply Ardent Sensor, and then you can use your W to bounce to 2 other allies. So you can get Ardent Sensor up pretty comfortably on 3 people in team fights with Nami. Same thing with Sona, obviously. Her aura is going to put it on everybody. But with Janna, you don't have anything that targets allies. And you can only shield one person at a time every 10 seconds. And so you're really only going to be able to put Ardent on one person, unless you ult, obviously. But you want to hold on to that for an emergency situation. So that is one thing to consider. She's not as strong with Ardent as a couple of these other options, but she's still pretty legit. So I think that Janna, particularly if they have a heavy dive comp, you know, she just smashes a lot of those types of champs, right? She's very good against Irelia, Aatrox, Fiora, Camille, like all of these champs, she's pretty strong at peeling them back. So if they have a lot of melee on their team, then Janna can be a pretty good option. Okay. And I haven't tried out Comet Janna, but it kind of makes sense. And then it's like you're giving up some of your late game power by not having Airy, but you're trying to apply more pressure early so that you can do something as Janna in the laning phase, which in this type of meta, I think makes a lot of sense. Okay. The final tier 1 is going to be Thresh. Thresh does take a hit on this patch, you know, like I said, because he really, really needs to get Zeke's. You know, he can still get things like Redemption if he has to. If we look at Thresh here, what are people building in the last couple of days? U.GG is a great site I've been using too lately. It not only gives you just kind of base recommendations, which I'm always a little wary of that because there's no context. It's just like this wins in a lot of games, but you don't really understand why people are building it. But it is linked up and partnered with pro builds, so you can see what other people are doing. It looks like most people are going back towards an Aftershock build just because the early game matters so much. You need to be strong. So no longer doing the Guardian build. We're doing Aftershock. And then it looks like a lot of people are still going Zeke's and they're just eating the loss. There are some people who are going like a Redemption early. But I'm still seeing like Zeke's as one of the most popular builds. So it looks like people are still going Zeke's and they're just going Redemption and then maybe like a Mikhail's or a Locket after that. A nice thing about Thresh, though, is he does have really good engage. You know, if you land that hook, you can kill enchanters pretty easily. He has really nice protection against ganks with his lantern. He still does all of his Thresh things. So the fact that an item is a little bit weaker on him is not as huge of a deal because you're picking him for his kit. Not for his scaling, not for his like synergy with different runes or different items. You're picking him just for that lantern and for that hook a lot of times because they're both just so powerful. And Flay's really good too. So I think he'll still be good. I just think that enchanters are going to outscale him statistically a lot harder. You know, if you get to 3 items, it's going to be tough. Now hooks, you know, never really go out of style. They're always going to be strong regardless of what state the game is in. But it's going to be really hard to win a team fight if you're Thresh and you're facing down like a 3-item Sona, 3-item Janna, something like that. And he also can get bulldozed in lane by things like Brand and like Zyra, just depending on the situation. It is a skill matchup, but the fact that like Zyra, for instance, can throw her plants through the minion wave, you can very easily hide behind your minions and just keep dropping plants on top of Thresh. He has a huge hitbox. He's pretty slow early on. You can use plants to block his hook as well. So I would not recommend Thresh probably at gold and lower because your teammates are not going to follow up on your hooks as much. They're not going to take your lanterns as much. And, you know, you potentially could get dumpstered by some of these AP champs, which are going to be a lot more popular at gold minus, your Brands, your Zyras, things like that. So you can definitely make him work, but I think that the higher up in ELO it goes, the stronger that he's going to get. Okay. So Thresh still pretty decent. Going down to tier 2, I went ahead and moved Brand up here. I had him as honorable mention last time, but that was just because I thought Zyra was better in most situations. But he's here. I went ahead, updated him, put him on here for you. So if Zyra's ever banned, you can play Brand. I guess if they have a lot of melee champs or you just don't like Zyra and her plants, I think Brand is an easier version to play. And so, yeah, he has a lot of synergy with Dark Harvest, which has been nerfed, but is still really good on him because if you get the resets in a team fight, if you kill somebody, they're still going to be burning from your passive potentially, and that will still trigger Dark Harvest. You know, we've tested that and figured out that Dark Harvest doesn't trigger off of Leandries or Ignite anymore, but it does still trigger off of things like Singed Poison, Teemo Poison, Brand Burn, just anything that's like one of your abilities that applies it. Dark Harvest will still work with that. So still going to be, you know, strong. He can do a lot of damage. He can bully people out. You know, he can take towers early, has really good team fighting later, really low cooldown ult that you can exploit. So he's still going to be a pretty strong champion. Just keep in mind, you don't have the same kind of vision control as Zyra. You're not going to have as much utility as far as like CC in a team fight. You'll still do a lot of damage with your ult, but you're not going to have as much CC. You're going to be more vulnerable to things like Yasuo and Brand, or Braum, rather. Probably won't be seeing as much Braum, particularly at gold minus, but you might see some Yasuo. Just remember that Braum's shield and Yasuo's wind wall will absorb your ultimate, versus with Zyra, you know, you just put your plants wherever you want to put your plants, and then your ultimate always extends to max range and does a ton of damage. So Zyra also plays better around those types of champions that have counterplay. So pretty good raw damage numbers, but you are sacrificing some of the utility of Zyra. So I'm still going to recommend Zyra if you're looking for someone to practice and to get good on. I still think that Zyra is going to be a bit better, but Brand can definitely be useful. Okay, Soraka's another one that I think has gained a lot of territory on this patch, primarily because she's such a great user of Mikhail's. You really, really want Mikhail's on Soraka, because Mikhail's... Let me go ahead and pull it up here. I'm probably spelling it wrong here. Oh, Jesus. Okay, let me just pull it up. Over here, I can just pull it up under items. Probably spelling it wrong. But it basically converts 100% of your mana regen into HP regen. So that's what helps keep Soraka alive early on, is you can get an early Mikhail's and a Redemption. And Redemption is going to give you the extra, you know, little bit of health regen, but it's that 150% mana regen that transitions over to 150% health regen, which is really good. And then this thing itself also gives 100% base health regen, just because it has 100% mana regen, which is a really good value. Right, so by itself, it's 139% gold efficient. That's not including the active, so pretty good. Not like Ardent Sensor scale, not like a really good Redemption that's going to hit like 4 allies type of scale, but it's nice. And being able to cleanse away CC is going to help keep your AD carry safe. Very strong item historically. And the fact that it has 20% plus healing and shielding scales extremely well with Redemption, because you get triple the value out of plus healing and shielding. So prior to this patch, you would only get 45% because it was 15 times 3. Now you're going to get 60% extra healing on your Redemption. So those Redemptions are going to be slamming. They're going to be healing a lot. So, you know, AoE healing is just going to be really, really strong. You know, with Soraka's heal itself, which is also going to benefit from all the plus healing and shielding bonuses, and dropping a Redemption in there, it's going to be very difficult to win a team fight against a Soraka that has a Mikhail's and a Redemption, unless you blow somebody up immediately. So I think that Soraka does gain a lot of real estate off of that. Soraka also is really good in the laning phase, as long as you don't get ganked. So she's a little rougher against ganks, but like Star Call, you can spam this, especially at lower elo brackets. You can hit people all the time with this, land your auto attacks. I would recommend getting like 3 points of this in lane. It heals you up. It does damage to them. It empowers your own heal so that you can heal your allies for even more. I really wouldn't recommend doing like the Equinox. I know that that was a really hot thing for a while there, where people would get like 3 points in Equinox. You know, I guess you can do that if you want to. It does about the same damage as Star Call, but Star Call is on a 5-second cooldown and Equinox is on a 20-second cooldown. So it's like, yeah, Equinox is guaranteed damage, right? Like, you just put it on somebody, it does 150 damage. But you can throw 4 of these. Surely you can hit 1 of those, right? If you can't hit 1 out of 4 Qs over 20 seconds, you've got some problems. You need to work on your skill shots, right? And so the fact that this, like, even if you hit 2 of these, it's doing double damage. Like, it literally does the exact same damage. This just has a little bit more CC. Yeah, if this hits twice, it does a ton of damage. It's not going to hit twice most of the time, unless you're with someone that has a lot of CC. Like, maybe if you have a Swain 80 carry or something, or you've got, like, I don't know, an Ashe or a Varus maybe at level 6. But that's why I typically advocate, is if you can hit these Star Calls at all, to get this. This is also really good wave clear, so you can wave clear that back line and help your AD carry push faster early on. So it heals you for more, it does the same amount of damage, it empowers your heal to heal allies more, it applies, I guess the slow is always there no matter what. It just does a lot of things. It has a lot more utility than the E does. The E is basically, it doesn't wave clear, it doesn't do damage to minions. So it's basically just, you know, a point click, you know, little bit of damage you can do every now and then. So, because they're usually going to be able to walk out of it before they get rooted, before they get the double damage. And you're still in like an all-in situation, you're only going to cast this once. Most of the time, right? Like, fights are not going to last 20 seconds. So, you know, the cooldown really doesn't matter that much, because it's so high all the time. right? Like, yeah, I guess if you get this fully maxed out with 40% CDR, you know, maybe you can cast it twice in a fight. But overall, like, this Q is just going to be so much more useful. Even later on in the game, just having more heals on your allies. I mean, keep in mind, like, this is 75 or 72 heal plus an additional 40%. So if you get to, you know, like 100 AP in the mid game, once you get your Ardent Sensor, then you're going to be dealing an extra 112 heal whenever you heal an ally after you've hit somebody with a Star Cold. That's a lot. That's like 50% extra healing. Just imagine this reads, you do 50% extra plus healing and shielding if you land this for however long, 4 seconds, right? Or 5 seconds. So it's a lot. Let's see, total self-heal. Where's allied heal? Oh, allied heal's even more. So it goes to 50% AP with 110. So they're doing 160. It's almost like a double heal. So yeah, definitely I would highly, highly consider getting, you know, multiple points in this in the laning phase, like 2 or 3 points of this in the laning phase instead of Equinox, and then maxing your W for the mid game, and then just saving the Equinox as your 1-point wonder. And then, of course, she has a super powerful ultimate that heals for a ton, has global presence, and is on a pretty long cooldown, but nevertheless is going to be strong. So I think Soraka is definitely coming back, one of the biggest beneficiaries of Mikhail's, of Redemption, especially if you have a couple of tanks on your team. She is still vulnerable to ganks. She is still vulnerable to assassins. But if people start moving towards more like mid-range mages, you know, things like Zoe, things like Orianna, things like Cassiopeia, and people start playing more tanks, then she can be good. So I think her effectiveness is going to be exponentially increased if they ever bring back tanks, which I think they're going to do at the start of next season. But anyways, I think she definitely is a bit stronger right now. So if you love Soraka, you can dust her off. She's going to be a lot better on this patch. Okay, Rakan is another one that he can work around the Zeke's nerf, right? Like I said, he can just switch over to Ardent Sensor and then something like Australia's or Redemption, so that'll be fine. The problem is he gets bullied out pretty hard early on by Nami and Sona. It's a strange matchup because you can definitely engage and kill them later, but in the laning phase, they're probably going to kill you. Now, you can try to adapt this and go for something like, you know, an airy build where you get 3 points of Q in lane and go Frostfang and just try to keep up with them. Because, I mean, it's pretty good trading. The problem is, like, they increased the cooldown on the Q a long time ago by, like, a couple of seconds or something early, but it's still pretty good trading. You know, if we compare that to Soraka, I think was dealing 150 with 3 points in her Q, and this is dealing 160, and it's healing for a pretty decent amount, you know, a 0.7, and then early on 42. So it's not healing for as much, but this can also heal you and an ally. Don't forget that early on. So it's really not a 42 heal with a 0.7 here. It's more like a an 84 heal with a 1.4 ratio. So it's pretty legit. And, you know, Rakan has really good utility, right? He can zip around the map. He can ward safely. He can, you know, bounce around with his E in fights. He can use the quickness to CC a ton of different people. So I think that Rakan can be very strong if you can just make it through the laning phase against something like a Sona, something like a Nami. But he's still going to be soft in the laning phase. So tremendous engage. Can have a hard time against Nami and Janna later on because they can peel him pretty well, particularly Janna. But overall, he's still going to be pretty good. So I think you want to do Airy, Nimbus Cloak, Focus, and then Scorch. If you don't want to do Scorch, you could do Water Walking, which is going to allow him to rotate a bit better. And then Footwear, Cosmic Insight. Just remember, Water Walking is going to be a lot stronger now because dragons matter a lot more and they're up more often. And so it's going to be a lot more relevant that you get that extra movement speed and AP when you're in rivers. So I think he'll still be pretty strong. So yeah, Zeke's is off now. I forgot to change Rakan up. Then we'll just go Ardent Sensor. And you kind of have to read the situation. You could go Redemption second or Shrelia second. Both of them can be pretty good options. And you can also go Mobility Boots instead of Ionian, but Ionian is particularly good on him because you just want that CDR as fast as possible so that you can get more ults off. But yeah, probably going to get smoked in the laning phase by most of the enchanters, but can be very strong later on. pretty good, or I mean, historically, he's pretty good against things like Thresh and like Pyke because he can dodge a lot of their stuff with his mobility, with his E and his W, and he used to be pretty good into assassins because he could get armor. But I don't know. Now, more people are also running him with Guardian. So I don't know. I think Aerie is pretty good if you're going for that harassment early on. Whatever they're doing is not working right now. He's only got a 45% win rate at sort of the pro level, and I think I just don't feel like Guardian's that great on him. If you don't mind kind of going all in on the on kind of your mid game, you can go Unsealed Spellbook, which I think is criminally underused on Rakan. It's very, very good. The problem is it doesn't help you out a ton in the laning phase. If you have a rough lane, you can teleport back and not miss experience and get a little more gold, so that's handy. But not entirely sold on Guardian. Just like it's nice, but you don't have Chrysalis anymore. Demolish is going to be difficult early on because you're probably going to be getting pushed in, so you're not going to be able to use it. Bone Plating's good. Revitalize actually gets a lot better here because you're not going to be getting Zeeks, right? You're going to be getting Ardent Censer, you're going to be getting Redemption, and things like that. So Revitalize definitely gets a bit more valuable because obviously this has no synergy with Zeeks. So if you're rushing Zeeks a lot of games, you know, Revitalize was not going to be a very good rune for you. And the Nimbus Cloak is amazing on him, and I'd probably just go Absolute Focus. It's just such a good trading tool early on, and it gives you some really nice AP for later on in the game, too, in team fights if you don't get focused out. So, we'll see. I think there is a build out there that can work for Rakan now. He's got a lot of flexibility. He's got a lot of different options. I would not go 5 points in Q. If you want to do the Q harassment thing, I'd go a maximum of 3. But I still think that, like, maybe, especially if you're going to go for, like, Ardent Censer plus Redemption, maybe getting something like E max first could be. So you do, like, 3 points of Q and then, like, max your E up to level 10 after that. But I'm going to have to experiment and just try because, you know, a lot of it's kind of shifted around. The meta's shifted around. Zeke's is no longer that great. So we'll have to regroup and sort of see what works on him. But I think the Ardent Censer plus Redemption could be good. And, you know, I'm kind of leaning towards liking Unsealed Spellbook again on him a little bit more. Getting some biscuits for the laning phase is nice. Cosmic Insight's fantastic on him. Free boots are great. It'll allow you to expedite your build a little bit more. And then, of course, Unsealed is really good just because he can use almost all of this, like, the extra summoners you can get really well. He can even use Ghost well. He can use Cleanse well. Then he can, of course, use the traditional, you know, heal, exhaust, barrier that are pretty much always going to be strong. He can even TP really well. Not only going back to your own lane for experience, but you could, like, TP top lane and make a play. You know, Rakan does have really nice flanking with his ult. So I think he has a lot of versatility. So I'm not quite willing to put him in Tier 1 just because laning phase matters so much, and he has a rough time with that, but I think that somewhere in Tier 2 is probably appropriate. He doesn't have a great win rate. It's only like 48%, but I think that a lot of people just aren't building him right because it's not obvious how you should build him. There's so many different things you can do, but I think a lot of people just aren't playing him correctly, and they aren't building him correctly. Okay, Leona is still going to be really strong. The Zeke's nerf hurts her, but she is great all in against things like Nami, Sona, Janna early on. If the game drags out and they get 3 items, you're going to have a hard time. But early on, particularly if you pair her with things like Lucian or Jhin or Draven, she can snowball out of control. She's a very risky pick, but she can snowball really hard. And you might notice one of the most conspicuous absences here is I took off Nautilus. I just feel like Leona's, you know, the reason that you would pick a tank right now would be to hard engage and dominate the early game. That's what I think. And I think Leona's just going to have a bit more damage early on than he does. And I think she's just going to be able to snowball a bit harder. The fact that she can engage through minions is also really nice. So I used to like Rakan before a lot of these changes. In the previous meta, before the rise of AP champs and now the rise of enchanters, is because he had like really consistent engage later on in the game. So you had a really fat hitbox on your hook, you could start fights, and then your ultimate would almost always be able to get to the back line and knock people up. So you could replace Leona with Nautilus here if you want to. He does have nice wave clear, which is good later on. But But I just feel like Leona is probably going to just be a bit more efficient and effective at that early game snowball versus Nautilus is a little bit better in the mid game, but you're already too far behind in the mid game right now when you're versus an Enchanter and even an AP support a lot of times. So I think that makes Leona look a little bit more attractive. Pyke, still going to be pretty good. He did get some nerfs here, but he is, you know, strong against Enchanters. If you land that hook, you can blow up the Sona, the Nami. You have a very, very good kill threat at level 6. He has really nice healing, really nice roaming, so he's good. The only problem with Pyke in the support role is that you really are incentivized to get lethality, which is expensive on a support budget. You know, 2,900 gold items are really hard to swing when you're trying to compete with an enemy support that's, you know, going to be getting their items for 2,100 gold, right? With their Mikhails, their Redemption, stuff like that. They're just going to get their items a lot faster because they're a lot cheaper. And so they're not as reliant on a snowball. So if the game just kind of like goes even, you're behind, you're losing. And I really don't like to be in that position as a support, right? I want to say, okay, if everything's even, I'm winning, you know, because a lot of things do just kind of go even in solo queue. So that's all right. Okay, so moving into tier 3, I think Blitzcrank's okay. You know, I just think that Thresh and Leona, Pyke, they're all just better versions of Blitz because they do other stuff. They have other utility, whereas Blitzcrank is, you know, he does the most damage, like all-in burst of any of those, especially early on. So if you land a lot of hooks, you can snowball really hard with him. But he just doesn't do anything else. If you miss your hook, you're completely worthless. So now he is pretty good against things, you know, that are immobile, like Nami, like Sona, like Zyra, if Zyra doesn't block the hook with her plants. He's just a very risky champion. So he can completely take over the game and win all by himself if you land all your hooks. But if you miss them, you're going to be completely worthless. So I would just rather have a plan B and a plan C, you know, off of something like Thresh. You know, you miss your hook, whatever. You still have your Flay, you can still peel. You still have your ult that can peel. You still have Lantern, you can save people. Your hook's on a lower cooldown if you just accidentally hit a minion or something like that. It costs less mana. So, you know, Blitz is okay. He's just like the oldest of old school hook champions, and his kit is pretty one-dimensional. Okay, Lulu, I think, can still be good in the right circumstances. She's really flying under the radar. She doesn't have a great win rate. I think the buffs to enchanters do help her, but it's not going to help her as much as other people because she only has one skill that benefits from plus healing and shielding, which is her E, and you don't even max that out a lot of times first. You know, you'll max out your Whimsy or W first most of the time. So you'll get like 3 points in E for the laning phase, but then I think a lot of times people are maxing out the W second. So, doesn't benefit as much as like Janna and Soraka from the plus healing and shielding. But if AD carries start coming back, you know, if we start seeing more Tristana or Varus, Twitch, she's excellent with Twitch and Kog'Maw if you have either one of those, because her attack speed steroid and her picks really, really benefits champs that have powerful on-hit effects and that get a lot of attack speed. So I think there are certain comps where she can be very good. She's pretty good against assassins too with her ultimate. So there are certain, you know, matchups and certain compositions where she can be strong. Hey, thanks for the sub, Peter. I appreciate it. But I think those are a lot more limited than other picks. So good in some situations. Okay. Fiddlesticks I have on here, he's kind of in a unique position to where he can serve as a hard engage AP support. So he still has nice poke with his E. His fear is still great CC. He can still do pretty well in all-ins off of his drain. Now, a lot of people are doing Aftershock on Fiddlesticks, and he actually has a pretty decent win rate at pro level, although not a very large amount of representation. See, a lot of people are just going Aftershock, Demolish, Bone Plating, and then Hextech, Flash Traption, and Biscuit. Now, a lot of people really like the Aftershock build. I'm not entirely sold on it. I don't know. I mean, pretty much every pro is going that build, so I guess that's probably what's good right now. That's really good for brawling early on. I still think that something like Dark Harvest could be good, just if you're going to be able to land a lot of poke in the laning phase. Just to get, it's so easy to get those triggers if the enemy gets low. You just put your E on the minion wave and it just goes under tower and it'll hit them. I wish you could squeeze in something like Presence of Mind or Ulti Hunters. You could ult more, but this is probably correct. It's going to keep you from getting blown up early when you go for the Aftershock, and then you can go for Stopwatch, which gives you a discount on your Zhonya's. It also allows your Zhonya's to come off cooldown a lot faster, 15% reduction on Zhonya's. And it's going to allow you to get things like your boots, which is going to improve your it's going to expedite your build a little bit more. So I think that he's a unique AP support that pushes really well, has good harass, and he has nice like point-click hard CC, and he has a great engage that has really high base damage. So I think that's the thing that separates him from Bran and Zyra. It's like he's not as oppressive in lane as far as like getting kills, but he can still wave clear and push pretty easily. And it's that ultimate later on, if you can get really good vision control and start fights with that ult, especially after you get Hourglass, then that puts him in a really unique position that, you know, Zyra and Brand are going to have a much harder time starting fights. I guess Zyra can still start fights pretty well if she has good vision, but Fiddlesticks can do it from a further range. So he's okay in certain compositions. If you need someone who can start a fight and you need a lot of like AP on your team, then I think he's a pretty decent option in the right situations. Okay, Braum is still probably going to be a survivor. Now, he's still going to be great at Challenger, most likely, because like the Zeke's nerf hurts, but people aren't picking him because of Zeke's. Yeah, he still has a high win rate. Right? They're picking him because of just his innate ability, right? Just because he has the like super team fight capability, just his passive with being able to stun everyone in a fight. He has an additional stun and slow knockup with his ult. And that shield just blocks a ton of incoming range damage. So he has a lot of utility. Even if his itemization is terrible, people will still pick him because he's got so much utility. So I don't recommend playing him at Platinum and lower just because he requires a lot of team coordination. And I think he can get bulldozed in lane, potentially by things like Zyra, even things like... he's pretty good against Nami because his shield does stop Nami's wave. But I think he can have a hard time against some other ranged champions. But he's very good. He's like the king of melee. You know, he's going to be strong into Thresh. He's going to be strong into Alistar because he can survive. And he's just going to have a bit more, well, not more utility than Thresh, but probably more raw team fighting power than pretty much anybody. So the higher the level of organized play goes, Braum's still going to be good. And he can always, you know, if he doesn't get Zeke's, he can still get things like Knight's Vow comfortably because he gets the full benefit off of that versus Thresh is not going to get that full benefit. So if you like to play a peeler tank, I think Braum is the best one to go. You know, he's still going to be pretty strong at the higher tiers, but I don't recommend him if you're, like I said, Platinum lower. Although, like, if you are going to play him, he's really good with Lucian, obviously, because those double shots are going to trigger your passive more. So I think that is something to consider. And then finally, Alistar. So Alistar did get knocked out a little bit. You know, they nerfed his E, but once again, people are going to still pick him at pro play because you're not picking him for his damage. You're picking him for his hard engage and his utility. I think oh, not Braum, Alistar. Sorry, let's just see how he's doing over the last couple of days. Yeah, he's down a little bit, even in pro play. But I still think you'll see him some. He just has nice, like, just point click, hard engage. You know, he can tower dive early, but, you know, like Braum, he's much stronger in organized play where you're going to have real 5v5 team fights, or where you can roam and make a play in the jungle or in the mid lane without your AD carry dying bottom. That's why, like, roaming is so dangerous in, you know, gold and lower, is because if you ever leave that lane, there's a pretty good chance your AD carry is going to die because they're going to not realize that you're gone, or they're not going to respect the engage potential of the enemy. You know, they'll think like, oh, you know, the enemy flashed on me and, you know, killed me. How was I supposed to, you know they're going to do that? It's like, well, they saw your support mid lane roaming, so they're going to go really hard on you in the lane. Right? They're going to engage like as soon as possible because they're going to know that you don't have any backup. So that's just something that kind of like, unfortunately, a lot of like gold AD carries aren't thinking like that. They're just playing like the support's there even when they're not. And so roaming supports like Alistar can potentially suffer from that. So where like roaming Alistar can be very effective in Diamond and Challenger, it can be rough to make that work in gold sometimes. So he'll still be okay, but I think he's definitely going to be down a little bit from last time. Okay, and then honorable mentions. I'm not going to talk a lot about all of these. Oh, I moved Fiddlesticks up. So yeah, Fiddlesticks is not on there anymore. But you can just kind of read them over. I do have the guides updated, I think, on most of them. So you can check that out. you know, they're okay. I get asked about Bard a lot. He's just really inconsistent. He doesn't have great itemization. He doesn't do well with AP items that much. He doesn't do super well with like plus healing and shielding items. A lot of that's because his ult has no scaling on it. His E has no scaling on it. His W is very anemic, and it's like most of the scaling on his Q is from his meeps. So he just doesn't have great itemization. His runes aren't great, and he, you know, you have to go roam to get those chimes, which, remember what I just said about Alistar. Roaming can be very, very dangerous, particularly at gold and lower, because your AD carry might just die no matter how many times you ping. So, and his attack range is really short. I mean, he only has 525 attack range, which is a huge problem when you're facing things like Zyra that have, you know, 575 attack range, and they have just more consistent abilities. You know, Zyra can just like point click put plants on you, but to like have a really effective Q, you know, you need to be stunning people, which means you have to have very specific angles. Usually you have to play around the minions, and so if you do get, or walls, so usually, you know, like you can get those stuns off, but it's just it's a lot more conditional. It's not as guaranteed. So I think it's just a much riskier pick. So can you win with Bard? Sure. You know, he can be a strong champ, but I think he just needs a little bit of help. Like he needs some kind of scaling on either his E or his ult. Or just, he needs like 550 auto. Oh, it's actually 500 auto range. Wow. Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. I thought it was at least 525. So yeah, it's super short auto range. I wish they'd give him like 550. Then that way he could really auto and trade. But as it stands, it's really rough. Morgana's okay. I get asked about her some too. She's just going to get dumpstered by other enchanters. They're just going to outscale her. So she's all right. But especially with Mikhail's being a lot stronger now, where they can, you know, comfortably get a Mikhail's to cleanse off your bind. It's going to be a lot rougher. Vel'Koz is a decent counter pick to specifically like Zyra or Brand because he outranges them, but he still has a hard time in a mobile meta where he can get picked off by assassins. So he's okay. I would just rather play Zyra or Brand. I just think they're a bit more consistent. Tom Kench is completely gutted. Just do not play Kench unless you're duo queued with the jungler and you know you're going to get a million kills off of using your ult bot lane. And then Zillion's all right, too. I do get asked about Zillion a lot. You know, he's pretty good against enchanters, but he's just going to get bullied and muscled out by things like Sona and Nami in the laning phase. If you consistently land double bombs hardcore a lot and you're with something aggressive like a Draven, then, yeah, you can dumpster, you know, a Nami early on. But if you're not landing those double bombs and she just gets to sit there and just harass you with her W and heal herself, the problem with Zillion is he doesn't have a heal or a shield. He doesn't particularly scale like super well with AP either. His bomb has decent AP on it, but like it doesn't affect his W and it doesn't really affect his E. So it's like he's kind of got Bard syndrome too, where it's like he's okay, but like there aren't really items or runes that go very well with his kit, and an enchanter with a heal or a shield is just going to outperform him a lot of the time. So those are probably the ones worth mentioning. Karma is in a terrible state. I wouldn't play her. They are going to rework her soon, so that's, you know, a new thing. It's just like she's going to get punished. You know, all of the other enchanters are just better than her. Her numbers are just really weak right now. They nerfed her in the dirt a while ago. Tarek is okay. He's going to get dumpstered in the laning phase, though, and if I want to get dumpstered, I'm just going to play Rakan probably. At least he can fight back a little bit, and he's going to have more consistent engage later. Tarek can scale pretty well, but he really needs to get Tear of the Goddess, which is not a fantastic item right now. And he's like super team fight reliant. Like, you know, Janna and Sona do well in team fights, but they can also skirmish sort of well. Like Tarek really wants to like use his ult on 5 people in a fight. So I think he's like, if tanks come back, you might see Tarek come back a little bit more when like 5v5 team fighting like lasts a little bit longer than like 3 seconds when someone gets blown up. Because that's another thing. If you like cast your ult on somebody, it takes however long. It's like 2 or 3 seconds to activate. I think it's 2.5 seconds, and they could die before that goes off very easily in this meta. And so, I would just rather play something more proactive. All right, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. We're going to clock in at under an hour here for like the first time in a long time. So be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Check out my patch notes video if you want to know more insight into the patch notes. Also check out, I'm going to release an 80 carry tier list, mid and jungle, and I'll try to get top in on this patch as well. I'll see if I can do like maybe 2 per day, at least 1 per day, maybe 2 per day to get these out kind of quickly for you. But anyways, that's going to be it. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.